the fourth turning, and why we are all stardust. Aion, Pluto, and wavelength. Quote, space and time form a psychological a priori, an aspect of the archetypal quaternity, which is altogether indispensable for acquiring knowledge of physical processes. Carl Jung. Hey, how's everybody? How to trust him within, not them, the noise. This week, I'm going to go geeky, geeky all the way. This article is going to be about charts and small talk. It is quite long, so pace yourself because I want you to look at these charts and try to make sense in your life. This is more or less like a mirror. You can then go and read more stuff. I'm going to base all the charts on the fourth turning, Pluto in evolutionary astrology, Aion, symbolic time, and the dimension of meaning that moves beyond physical matter in biogeometry as frequency. I'm talking about generations. I'm talking about cycles ending and starting. And I'm doing all this because by this summer, we're all going to have all the bigger planets changing signs. This signals a new reset. They're going to be temporarily in a new sign until the fall when they're all going to go back to the previous sign. Saturn and Neptune will re enter Pisces, and Uranus will go back briefly to Taurus, except Jupiter in Cancer and Pluto in Aquarius. And this reminds us there's probably things that we have to revise before we move into the next PHASE phase. Da-da-da-dee. The fourth turning, cycles of collapse and renewal. Quote, the fourth turnings save us from complacency. They force our society to re-civilize. History is seasonal and winter is coming. Let's start with the fourth turning, a book by William Strauss and Neil Howe that tracks the rhythm of history in four-part cycles called turnings. Turning comes from the Old English turnian, to rotate, revolve, or pivot. Each cycle or saculum, meaning a long human life or a generation, lasts about 80 to 100 years, roughly a human lifespan. It moves through four phases: high, awakening, unraveling, and crisis. We're now deep into the fourth one, the crisis. From the Greek krisis, a decision, a fork on the road, a judgment point. They call it a time of collapse and rebirth where institutions scramble and a new order emerges. This was done over studies that they are traced over 500 years of Anglo-American history and saw the same pulse repeating. History is seasonal, they wrote, and winter is coming. Each generation plays a role, like actors in a myth, the prophets, missionaries, the nomads, survivors, and the heroes, rebuilders, and the artists, harmonizers. It's so very archetypal. You cannot predetermine because things unfold with the free will of the people. However, this can be read as a sentiment of humanity through cycles. Recognizing where we are in the cycle gives us a clarity about what's fading, what's rising, and why we're actually here to. Quote, yet, the great weakness of linear time is that it obliterates time's recurrence and thus cuts people off from the eternal, whether in nature, in each other, or in ourselves. There's a space for an image that was taken from the book. It was done by somebody else. I have link that shows you who did it. I should name him, but he's in the link. And so we have this table divided in first, second, third, fourth turning, and then the times and everything. But I'll leave that to you. Then there's a second chart that explains the turnings with generational and the archetypes. Leave that to you, my friends. Quote, when you don't follow your nature, there's a hole in the universe where you're supposed to be. Dane Rudyard. Evolutionary astrology. It's called that because it tracks the evolution of the soul. The term was coined by Jeffrey Wolf Green, who defined it as the study of the soul's journey over lifetimes. He worked with Pluto as the main symbol of that journey, Pluto as the force that compels evolution through necessity. Jeffrey used to say, Pluto is the agent of the soul's evolutionary journey. Where there is resistance, Pluto will create pressure. End of quote. Pluto shows where we hold unconscious attachments to power, to survival strategies, to identities we've outgrown. It also shows the kind of loss or confrontation we're here to metabolize. It always brings a theme of power and disempowerment. So, the placement of Pluto in your chart by sign, by house, and by its ruler, and especially by its relationship to the lunar nodes, shows the place in this lifetime where you've been asked to reclaim your own power. In evolutionary astrology, the polarity point is key. Pluto shows where we are disempowered. The opposite sign shows the medicine or the way out. For example, if you were born with Pluto in Scorpio, the millennial generation from 1983 to 1995, approximately, then your integration path lives in Taurus, self sufficiency, resource stewardship, value embodiment. That's why so many millennials have become the emotional and philosophical backbone of Bitcoin and have also approached it through psychedelics or other forms of integration that go straight to the core of the problem. They're interested in the embodiment of common sense, integrating lifestyle with purpose and service. I'm generalizing here. They carry the soul memory of collapse, betrayal, and control, and they're here to root into something unshakable. What happens if you're not a millennial like me? I have my moon in Scorpio and I have my Pluto in the eighth house. So I carry this signature. That's why I align so well with this generation. When I realized this around 12 years ago, I was so happy that I found my kin because until then, with my Pluto in Virgo, I was too focused on trying to find perfection in the imperfect. Mind you, there are other characteristics I found relevant in Bitcoiners or in people moving towards rebuilding a civilization where the money problem is solved. But that's another article, my friends. Before we go into the specific tables, Pluto generations, Uranus timelines, Jupiter Saturn conjunctions, here's the meta frame. 3 overlapping arcs, 1 threshold decade. This is the convergence zone we're living through. Fourth turning plus Uranus plus Jupiter Saturn convergence summary and expanded. Each fourth turning lasts 80 to 100 years, aligning closely with one Uranus orbit. This moment of crisis brings institutional collapse, generational reckoning, and potential rebirth. Generational archetypes cycle in order: prophet, visionaries, nomad, pragmatists, hero, builders, artists, harmonizers. Each generation enters a different phase, shaped by the prior. Jupiter and Saturn conjunctions happen every 20 years and define the scaffolding of societal values and systems. Jupiter seeks meaning and vision. Saturn consolidates form and responsibility. Together, they rebirth cultural institutions, education, governance, legal norms. Their oppositions, every 10 years after each conjunction, mark cultural tension, often triggering shifts or reckonings in ideology, structure, or belief. Uranus orbits every 84 years. In Gemini, it will bring cognitive revolution and ideological bifurcation. It approves how we think, how we speak, and how we construct narratives. This is what's coming. The 2020 Jupiter Saturn conjunction in Aquarius launched a new 200-year air trigon: innovation, networks, and abstraction. And decentralization now drive civilizational design. Material power is no longer primary. By 2044, Pluto will complete its passage through Aquarius. Between now and then, humanity may witness either the greatest liberation or the most complete disintegration of its narrative coherence. 2020 until 2033, there's a convergence zone of historical arcs. Fourth turning climax, Uranus in Gemini returns. Jupiter and Saturn begin the air era. If there's a new human emerging, we are inside its threshold moment. And last but not least, Saturn Neptune reset at 0, 1 degree of Aries, resetting the whole dial. Social ideologies and structural shifts, 36-year rhythms. Saturn architects reality, Neptune dissolves boundaries. Together they reveal epochs of collapse, reimagination, and reform seen here across revolutions, treaties, and ideological mutations. Are you ready as an individual to be based Okay, so I was not going to read the chart, but I think I will make a disservice for the people who are actually listening to my stuff. So it's going to be a little bit longer than what I thought, but I think it's worth that I read the passage of Pluto through the signs, starting from Pluto in Taurus, 1852 until 1884. The evolutionary theme is survival, land, material continuity, and self-worth tied to possession. The polarity point or synthesis is to let go of attachment to impermanence, integrate death, and share transformation. The historical arc is Industrial Revolution, maturity phase, railways, telegraphs, and empire building, consolidation of land and wealth, rise of industrial capitalism, colonial expansion defines material value, spiritual counter currents like theosophy. They begin to question material dominance. Pluto in Gemini, 1884, 1914. The theme is language, intellect, dualities, fragmented perception, and the hunger to categorize. The polarity point is Sagittarius, seek integration through embodied truth, philosophical vision, and lived wisdom. The history around this time is to the print culture explosion. Nationalism, journalism, and scientific method clash with spiritual revival movement. Telecommunication and education systems become ideological battlegrounds. Intellectual bifurcation intensifies. Pluto in Cancer, 1914, 1939. The theme is an ancestry, emotional security, homeland, and protective tribalism. The polarity is mature through self-responsibility and build emotional sovereignty through disciplined structure. The historical arc are wars, and global trauma drive emphasis on nationalism, family identity, and security. Formation of mass institutions, schools, governments, militaries intended to protect. Nuclear family ideal becomes both shelter and cage. Pluto in Leo, 1939, 1957. The theme, evolutionary, is identity, self-expression, creative legacy, and ego integration. The polarity point in synthesis is Aquarius, align individuality with the collective good, shift from performance to contribution. Historical art, post-war optimism, rise of mass media, Hollywood, celebrity culture, and the self-made myth. Nuclear age pride fused with Cold War paranoia. Personal greatness glorified through national narratives. Pluto in Virgo, 1957, 1972. The evolutionary theme is purification, service, discernment, and humility through systems. The polarity point, Pisces, trust the mystery, heal through surrender, not just perfection. The historical arc, civil rights, feminism, the environment, anti-war movement, systems analysis, critique of institutional power, health, healing, and ecology emerge as spiritual callings, rise of automation and analytic logic. Pluto in Libra, 1971 till 1984. Evolutionary theme, relational equilibrium, justice, and the projection of identity onto others. The polarity point, Aries, reclaim selfhood, relay through authenticity, not compromise. The historical arc is postmodernism, divorce culture, legal reform, identity politics, shift from the communal ideas to individuated negotiation, rise of aesthetics, branding, and diplomacy. Pluto in Scorpio, 83 until 1995. The evolutionary theme, shadow work, psychological death, control, and emotional rebirth. Polarity point, Taurus, anchor into value, embody trust and regenerate through the body. Historical arc, end of the Cold War, AIDS crisis, tech transformation, rise of trauma discourse and therapy, desire for intimacy and amid systems of surveillance and collapse. Power exposed and reborn. Pluto in Sagittarius, 1995, 2008. Evolutionary theme, faith, exploration, global belief systems, and ideological polarization. The polarity point, Gemini, speak with nuance, replace dogma with dialogue. The historical arc, globalization, internet freedom meets cultural moralism, rise of spiritual bypass, information expansion, and influencer as guru, immigration, borders, and cultural identity influx. Pluto in Capricorn, 2008, 2023. Evolutionary theme, structure, legacy, collapse of authority, and rebuilding through realism. The polarity point, Cancer, lead with care, nurture systems that hold emotion and life. Historical arc, financial crisis, collapse of trust in institutions, digital surveillance state, rise of decentralized finance, authoritarian populism, and pandemic restructuring. Pluto in Aquarius, 2023 2043. Evolutionary theme, technological soul, decentralization, collective reorientation of power. The polarity point, return to the heart, ground collective truth in sovereign expression. Historical arc, AI proliferation, decentralized systems, breakdown of national state governance, digital tribalism, tension between global coherence and isolated brilliance, potential for quantum leap or fragmentation. The key figures in the Pluto and Taurus, 1852-84. Let's say Krishnamurti, Virginia Woolf, Ludwig von Mises, Jorge Luis Borges, then Rudyard. Pluto in Cancer, we have Italo Calvino, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Joseph Campbell, Hannah Arendt. Pluto in Leo, John Lennon, Bob Dylan, Carl Sagan, Angela Davis. Pluto in Virgo, Jeff Bezos, Nick Cave, Christopher Nolan, Michael Saylor, Jeff Booth, Max Kaiser, Monica Bravo. Sorry, I had to do that. Okay. Pluto in Libra, 1971, 1984. Angelina Jolie, Elon Musk, Kanye West, Russell Brand. Some are going through a rough middle-age crisis, I have to say. Some people who have contributed and are faring well, we can say Seyfedinomus and my friend Efrat Fenningson. They're key figures of a new reset. Pluto in Scorpio, 83 until 95. So I divided this in 3 groups. Get ready. Bitcoin maximalist and synthesis thinkers. We can say Lynn Alden, Jack Mallers, and Natalie Brunel. There's a description in the reading page about what they do. Second group, radical exposers and sober dissidents, Edward Snowden and Yeonmi Park. Third one, the simulacra of cultural noise, Mark Zuckerberg. He masters control but not consciousness. Grimes, you know that singer, she is an AI mystic cosplay, occasional poetic, mostly brand simulation, the voice of the machine pretending to feel. And last but not least, Aubrey Marcus, a sleaze in the skin of shamanism, open relationships, ayahuasca tourism, and performative wokeness, sold as death. Libido wrapped in a wisdom costume, always on brand, always merch ready, vomit emoji incoming. Pluto in Sagittarius, 1995, 2008. Most visible, mostly lost. Billie Eilish, Greta Thunberg, Willow Smith, Emma Chamberlain, Mr. Beast. They're all raised inside the algorithm, all made into icons before integration. They probably have good intentions, but zero compass. They echo the collective pain, stylized and sold. Moral urgency becomes merch. Vulnerability becomes pose. Generosity becomes monetized spectacle. They're reflecting a deceit. Pluto in Capricorn. To be honest, we have to decide this. Look at your children now. We will know next. And Pluto in Aquarius, I mean, these kids are very, very young. So they're post-pandemic paradigms. Let's see how they fare well. There's an image of the time cycles of Saturn and Neptune cycle every 36 years. I'm not going to read it. It will be nice if you see it because you will see how society actually resets itself every 36 years. By the way, somebody asked me the other day, why do I do that? And so, just in case you're sleeping. Here we go. Synthesis. The fourth turning speaks of history as seasonal. Jeffrey Wolf Green speaks of the soul evolving through pressure. Jung in Aion speaks of symbolic time, epochs ruled by archetypes, the movement of collective consciousness through myth. All 3 point to the same truth. We live inside cycles, and cycles live inside of us. What shifts isn't just history or psyche or karma, it's the very framework of meaning. Strauss and Howe track the mood of society. Jeffrey tracks the compulsion of the soul. Jung maps the eons, 2000-year eras of psychic dominance. And somehow, here we are, standing in the hinge of all three, end of a turning. The age of Pisces dissolving under our feet. Are we creating time? Are we part of this time cycle? Do we belong to the stars? Are we the same particles? Only different matter? I'm looking at the structure, not just the theory of things. Wavelength, migration, field, everything is moving through frequency. Some call it neutrinos, some call it energy, chi, prana, intention. But everything, the breath moves through us. It is literally happening, not just metaphorically. Every planetary body emits a frequency and every human body receives it. The timing of these cycles is not outside of ourselves, it is us. The Saturn return you feel in your bones is your skeleton remembering its contract. The Pluto transit that undoes your plans, that's your soul realigning with this original impulse. And when you hit your Uranus opposition in your early 40s, what they call the middle life crisis, that's actually a call to snap out of the life you've been living against your will. You call it astrology or the logos of the stars, or you can call it coherence, you can call it cycles, time cycles. We are all tuning forks. We are wavelength made in flesh. Are we really tuning and listening to it, or are we just deaf? So while I could go quantum here, I'm not. I want to keep it graspable. You don't need a PhD in physics to understand resonance. You just need to pay attention. And that's what this whole piece is about. It's an invitation to feel the patterns you're already living. Beautiful chart. It's called Time, Memory, Eras. And you will have to look at it because it's a beautiful thing that comes from 10,000 years before Christ, and it goes to 14,000 after Anno Domini. And right now we're supposed to be in this so-called Christ return, the year 2000. So just go figure. This has to do with Aion and the eras and the Kali Yuga. Ta-doon. Aion and the symbolic eras. Quote, no tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. Aion is a child at play, gambling. A child's is the kinship, Jung. In Aion, Jung describes time as a symbolic epoch. It is not very precise with the dates, approximately a 2000-year cycle shaped by archetypal forces in the collective psyche. We all carry this. Call it a consciousness data bank. In the age of Pisces, that began approximately around the time of Christ or the start of the Anno Domini AD era, time was ruled by the image of the fish, faith, sacrifice, redemption, and the polarity between body and soul. It ushered in the archetype of the Savior, a longing for divine union and the shadow of persecution in the name of love. Because the soul was sensing its division, it searched for synthesis, one and all. Blind belief, martyrdom, a moral control become the patterns of power. Does it sound familiar? Now, as we move slowly into the age of Aquarius, a new symbol arises, the water bearer. Symbolically, he pours the water. He distributes consciousness, awareness. We open our eyes and begin to see what has been hiding. The field activates. Aquarius speaks of individuation, breaking free from following blindly, from worshiping a pastor or a shepherd. In order to unbind from collective conditioning and take responsibility for our own frequency, we must individuate. What is the shadow of this age? Disconnection, disassociation, simulation, cognitive fragmentation, AI as oracle, selfhood as code. On a personal level, I feel that what Jung saw in the coming age of Aquarius was the invitation to individuate. The second coming of Christ is not per se a person. It is not the return of a Messiah. It is individuation as the journey. It is about inner integration. This means stepping out of the inherited trauma loops, ancestral scripts, and archetypes that no longer fit. It means no longer waiting for a savior, a messiah, but becoming the coherent pattern within your own life. You are the rebellion. You are the return. You are tuning into your own frequency, dude. What I can bring here is my 9 years of studying with a Taoist teacher and a lifelong exploration of Taoism as both a spiritual practice and a method of tracing time. Think of the I Ching as a clock, a wave, and a map of all at once. Human design is built from it. The 64 hexagrams mirror the 64 codons of DNA. The inner structure of time is already living in the body. The Taoist tradition speaks of the undivided field as Wu Ji, before duality, before cycles. Then from yin and yang, what Taoism calls the Tai Chi, arises the pattern of change. Two lines, open is yin, closed is yang. From these arise the 8 trigrams, and from them 64 extragrams, each moment, each a shape of reality. This is structure. It's a scaffolding behind movement. And it reminds us that before time was measurable, it was rhythmic. Before it was counted, it was felt. Dr. Ibrahim Karim, the founder of Biogeometry, calls this qualitative energy the subtle resonance behind all form and perception. His work shows that shape, color, sound, and movement emit specific energetic signatures, and that harmony isn't just aesthetic, it's structural. What we think, what we build, what we inhabit, all broadcast frequency. That's why this isn't just abstraction, it is somatic, it is architectural, somehow real. On energetic time travel and multidimensional perception. So, although this article has focused on time cycles as we experience them in linear fashion through the fourth turning, Pluto generations, and historical shifts, we must remember time is not confined to the material timeline. There are other ways of perceiving it. In part 9 of Hidden Reality, Dr. Ibrahim Karim writes about energetic time travel and the physics of quality. He explains that all of creation, from beginning to end, forms a unified informational field. Past and future exist within each other, simultaneously through harmonic resonance. This field, he suggests, contains all probabilities in an ever present state. Through our subtle bodies, our mental, emotional, and soul levels, we can move in any direction in time. This is not fantasy, it's perceptual. In dreams, in memory, in altered states, we already do it. The ego can't move through time because it is the lens of how it perceives reality, but the soul can. And when the movement is coherent, it can ripple into the physical dimension. The aim of this article is not to map all possible ways of tracking time. Rather, is to offer a framework through generational, historical, and planetary shifts that help us differentiate between the mechanical passage of events and the qualitative perception of change. This is one way of reading the rhythm. There are others, though. Ding. Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions, 1762 until 2020. Historical and cultural echoes. This is a long list, but I'm going to do it. Well, it's actually not that long, so I'm going to go. 1762, Sagittarius 14 degrees, colonial expansion and enlightenment thought, Voltaire, Rousseau. Jesuit missions expand, global empires encode religious law. 1782, Leo at 16 degrees, post-American Revolution leadership cult. George Washington, U.S. Constitution takes form, France begins descent into monarchy collapse. Personal sovereignty becomes political doctrine. 1802, Virgo 5 degrees, start of Earth trigon. James Watt's steam engine patents expand industry. Ellie witness cotton gin and interchangeable parts model, factory logic. Industrial revolution scaled, work, systems, specialization emerge. 1821, Aries at 24 degrees, Latin American revolution speak. Simón Bolívar, nationalism surges, ideological assertiveness and mechanized militaries rise. Greek War of Independence begins. 1842, Capricorn 8 degrees. Railway booms, telegraphy tested, British colonial governance systemized in Hong Kong after First Opium War. Mid-industrial order building, legal codification, global bureaucracy. 1861, Virgo at 18 degrees, US Civil War begins. Florence Nightingale reforms healthcare. Darwin's logic of natural selection formalizes. 1881, Taurus 9 degrees. Colonial cartography divides Africa. Rothschild's banking empire grows. Value fixed in resources. Impressionism dominates art. Colonial resources extraction. Value tied to land and capital. Rise of banking empires. Deep interest in occult arises. 1901, Capricorn 14. Peak of industrial empires. Edison, Tesla, battle over electricity. World's fairs showcase modernity. Cities, empires, modern governments crystallize. Control of money creation and fractional central banking that will lead to corruption. Hello. 1921, Virgo 27 degrees. Post World War I, trauma reforms, Bauhaus founded, rise of totalitarian models, cultural split between precision and propaganda, rise of fascism and socialism, bureaucratic state strengthens, false idealism in the guise of utility. J.D. Rockefeller starts to distract the food and the health industry with his evil pharmaceutical products and his fake philanthropy, funding research that sterilizes inquiry, rewriting medical education to serve chemical profit, and restructuring the school system to train obedience instead of thought. Wow. 1940, Taurus 14 degrees. World War II logistics systems. Bretton Woods planning begins. International Monetary Fund and United Nations are all established to monitor full global control of resources in the guise of humanitarianism. Picasso's Guernica as an anti-fascist iconography. WW2 restructuring, control of supply chains and resources, food, fuel, security. 1961, Capricorn 25 degrees. Kennedy era begins. Berlin Wall. NASA Apollo program. Did that happen? Psychedelia roots in counter structure. The beginning of the dream turned into a nightmare. Boomers' lack of accountability started then. Cold War order. Bureaucracies expand. Corporate state merges. 1981, Libra 4 degrees. Reagan, Thatcher, neoliberal pact. AIDS epidemic breaks silence. MTV, anesthetic over authenticity. Neoliberal restructuring. Deregulation, aesthetics, contracts, rise of brand identity. 2000, Taurus 22 degrees. Dot bomb bust. Gold fetishism rises. Design thinking becomes cultural product. iMac, Apple minimalism. Fixed value fixation. Finance becomes virtual. More financial bubbles. 2020, Aquarius 0 degrees starts the air trigon. Networks, decentralized tech, and mass psyops. Scandemic resets governance. Rise of plant medicine. Crypto shitcoinery. AI art. Censorship. And finally, Bitcoin goes mainstream. More money printing galore. Hell yeah. Ta-da! Uranus in Gemini, ideological bifurcations. 1775, 1782, American and French Enlightenment ferment. Declaration of Independence and Smith's Wealth of Nations. Uranus in Gemini births modern liberalism, capitalism, in national mythos. Ideas become weapons. Uranus in Gemini coincides with national birth and intellectual upheaval. 1859, 1866, U.S. Civil War. Darwin's Origin of Species. Explosion of newspapers, syndicalism, and early unions rise. Communication becomes battlefield. Race, science, and nationhood are split ideologically. 1941, 1949. World War II apex, United Nations, Bretton Woods institutions, IMF, World Bank, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, GATT. Atomic bomb and binary code signals the Gemini age of dual use of knowledge. Post-war order built on split moral narratives. Control versus cooperation. Global control mechanisms disguised as reconstruction. 2025, 2033, incoming. Cognitive mutation era. Decentralized tech meets AI and digital speech warfare. Transhumanism versus embodiment. Thought becomes infrastructure. Will language liberate or fracture the self? Will Plutonian Aquarius birth new freedom or full transhumanistic detachment? Will humanity retain coherence? Shifting the way I embody value. Another essential layer of this piece is what's happening astrological this week. Venus in Aries dares the heart to go first, while Mars in Leo trines with courage, while Mercury in Taurus squares the fire. It's also asking, can your words hold weight, or are they just sparks without ground? The Sun entered the fun sign of Gemini. Jupiter, the planet of knowledge, expansion, perspective, idealism, religion, philosophy, is in Gemini. It has been lighting up the nervous system by giving light to ideas, the way we think, how we speak, how we move information through the body. And now that Jupiter is squaring the nodal axis, the South Node in Virgo is asking for discernment, editing what no longer belongs. If it's done without judgment, but through discernment and clarity, is what makes sense. It's what stays, and what no longer fits goes. It fades away. In my chart, Virgo is in the 8th house, so I'm asking deep questions about shared values. What's mine? What's theirs? And where do they meet, or where do they part? Where do they end and transform? This has been the work since the nodes entered the 2nd, 8th house axis. The North Node in Pisces is an invitation to surrender, to trust that the knowledge Jupiter is activating is something I can embody. And if I'm aligned with my own authenticity, with Jupiter in the 5th house right now, if I'm just repeating other people's language or beliefs, I will feel the friction. My body, 2nd house, will know. That's how I'll learn to trust this knowledge, this practice. Value has been activated at another layer. Over the past year, especially through Jupiter's retrograde, we've been trying new ways of thinking. By now, something should be perfecting towards clarity. Jupiter will enter Cancer in June. Before it does, it's offering a final respite to choose the thoughts, the truths, and the perspectives that actually fit your rhythm. And to do that with discernment. And this connects to Uranus. When Jupiter met Uranus in Taurus back in April 2024, a doorway opened. Jupiter expanded the field. Uranus is about to run voltage through it. Electricity will make all of these thoughts and directions become even more alive. Ideas will mutate. Language will split and spark. Technology and AI are going to go completely nuts. Thoughts that don't belong to you will be unbearable. They will leave suddenly. Who is behind to control the machine or the human mind? The nodal axis is moving back and forth from the past to the future and back again. Uranus will square the nodes. In the upcoming year, we will have time to rehearse this new electrical power. This skip step will force choice. Your work is to synthesize what is actually yours. It depends on where this lands in your chart. For me, Jupiter is in the 5th house, squaring the 2nd and the 8th. So before I creatively express something new, I'm revisiting what I value, what I've shared, and how those values are embodied in real time. Something shifted for me this weekend after the Sun Uranus conjunction. I felt it in the way I relate to value, as I mentioned in my last newsletter. And I should mention, Pluto is currently squaring my natal Jupiter. On my birthday, Jupiter was exactly in the midpoint between Pluto and Mars opposition. It felt like an initiation, something open that I'm going to be working on the whole year. I'm excited about that. I love my Jupiter position in my chart, and I love that it is happening like this for me. Have you been aligning with the single system this whole time? Have you noticed what's been quietly shifting inside of you? Last but not least, Saturn, the energy that defines, supports, and limits our reality, moves to the reset place, zero barriers. Today, in few hours, as I am reading this, I will write in the next newsletter about Saturn and Aries through the houses. I'm getting way too many downloads on 2nd house things, and this is where Saturn is asking me to be and act more mature. On a practical level, because I have the moon in Scorpio 12 degrees on my midheaven in the top of the sky, and my 9th house next to my Neptune in the 10th house in a balsamic relationship, I have the capacity to dive deeply into unconscious, but also to see the connection of all things, not limited to real life, everything that's connected to the divine. This moon is in conjunction with the fixed star called Alphika, also known as the Jima, one of the brightest stars in the northern crown. The Arabic root refers to the bright star of the broken ring. This fixed star blends beauty, artistry, communication, and intellect. In this placement, it enhances my ability to tap deeply into the unconscious realms and access precise psychological insights. I offer one-on-one readings in human design and evolutionary astrology as a way to support others through the synthesis I personally use in my life. I have a gift to tap into the archetypes, not just because I know the language, but because in the way I create a connection while asking specific questions to the person I'm reading. I access something that has been there for a long time, something that needs to be revealed in that specific moment. I do work with the time cycles, but I am also on a deeper level working with qualitative time that runs across spaces you can't quantify, where all memory resides. You can call it the Akashic field or just a deep well of the psyche. That's where and when I tap into the soul to bring forth what's ready to be seen. This is how I read patterns. It's done through the chart and the conversation. Without that relationship, for me, there's nothing. I offer prompts, archetypal cues, so the person can begin to trace their own narrative, their own symbolic structure. This is what leads to a more intimate relationship with themselves. That's what I care about. Wrapping it all in a Gemini fashion. Okay, my friends, this is a lot of information, like good old sun in Gemini. This is just shooting information left and right. And this information can be helpful once you start reading more deeply about the fourth turning, or if you want to dive into the Carl Jung's work of Aion, or even the fabulous work of Jeffrey Wolf Green on evolutionary astrology. If you're interested, I have some of these books in PDFs. Just shoot me a message and I'll send you a copy. However, in a very good Gemini fashion, I'm just opening the doors of curiosity. It's up to you whether you ride through that wave or not. Understanding time and perspective is super important. Although I don't plan my life accordingly, what I do is I come back and then everything makes sense. Last but not least, why this matters to me. It's been deeply important for me to look at life from an observational point, watching, listening, tracking the patterns that repeat. I have a kind of mind that relates to patterns intuitively. I see them and then insights emerge, not because I chase them, but because I witness them. These cycles become points of entry. Sometimes they're triggers, sometimes they're windows. But when they affect me internally, they're more than symbols, they're jump starts. They move me to the next phase of evolution. Today, as I write to you, Saturn moves into Aries. It will stay there a few months before returning to Pisces. This shift signals a new kind of accountability, a call to become responsible for how we act and why. I see a world still running on semi automatic, still waiting for permission, still waiting to be told what to do. And I admit sometimes I'm harsh. I speak strongly, maybe too strongly. Maybe I'm yelling at people who aren't tuned to hear me. Or maybe I should just let them be. It's not that I'm giving up, it's that I know now my energy is purposeful only when it's offered to those who are already listening. It's not that my truth is the truth. I've simply tuned into a frequency that allows me to be of service. And the best way I know how to support this by offering what has been useful for me. That's why I study cycles. That's why I compare them. Not because they're absolute, but because they reveal. There is no one true cycle of observation. The fourth turning sees history through behavior. Evolutionary astrology sees it through the soul. Jung saw it through the archetype and dreams. None of these are exact, but they align. And when they do, they offer a clue. Jung was able to foresee what others couldn't, not because he had a map, but because he was tuned inward. He listened to the unconscious. There are many ways to get to Rome. There's not a single path. And that's the point. For me, observing cycles has been vital in my journey. That's why I share them. But the most important thing is this: you find your own way. How do you read your cycles? How do you respond or not respond to them? Or maybe you don't need to know the cycles at all. That can also be true. I wish you all a beautiful week. And if nothing else, I hope this sparks your curiosity to read these books, to track your own patterns, or to find you more questions than answers. Thank you so much for arriving to these 44 minutes. Because for me, having more questions is what keeps the inquiry alive. It's what keeps me going. Have a good week.